Hello everyone, my name is Conrad on behalf of CameraStuff. Hope you're doing pleasantly well today. Welcome to the CameraStuff Studio. So you can see behind me we have Cammy the mannequin in action. So today we're going to do a bit of a live shoot and we're going to use these fancy Neewer RGB sticks just to create some colored lighting effects. Specifically more so oriented around portrait specifically. So what you see in front of you is me obviously in one feed, but you can see the camera feed as well. Right, so we can see a bit of a live preview as to what's going on. So around me, you can see the studio. So as I make adjustments, when I move the lights around or change settings, you can see exactly what I am doing. And also with the camera feed, you can see the results live as well. Right, so it's the first time that we're doing this. Hopefully everything is fine. Hopefully my audio is okay as well. So do drop a comment in the comment section just to confirm if everything is going swimmingly well. All right, so as mentioned, this is the first time I'm doing this. I can't see the comments here. So I need to go to the laptop there to see your comments. So every now and then there may be some disconnection where I need to run to the laptop just to see what you guys are commenting. But yeah, just to get into the swing of things, I suppose, we are going to do a review on these RGB sticks from Neewer. Now these are constant lights, so not flashes whatsoever. Now the thing about constant lights is generally speaking, they're not as bright as your flashes. Now you can see with the live feed there what my camera settings are. I need to use an ISO of 400, an aperture of 4.5 and a shutter speed of 60th just to get enough light in. Now, I can probably play around with your settings. If you're not happy using a higher ISO, for example, ISO 400, you can readjust your aperture or your shutter speed. But generally speaking, I would not recommend using a shutter speed lower than a 60th or an 80th of a second. That is if you want to avoid motion blur in your images. Also with constant lights, I would also recommend using a tripod, as is the case there. Yeah, just to avoid motion blur as well, just a bit of handshake from your side. I want the image to be as stable and as sharp as possible. All right, so behind me, you can see at least one light setup for the time being. And that's going to be our main light, so position as is, about 60 to 70 degrees from our subject. Is creating a nice Rembrandt effect on our subject. The little triangle, more or less, that we see on a cheekbone. And that's pretty much the basis of what we're going to do or work with initially. So, first order of business, I'm just going to pop this guy in. Just bear with me. See what we have going on. All right, so we have some guys joining the live. So thank you for joining. If you have any questions, do drop them in the comment section. So I'm going to switch off this light. What I'm going to do now is introduce a backdrop light. So you can see positioned behind Cammy, we have one of these lights set up. Now this is aimed directly at the backdrop itself. Now we're just using a standard white PVC backdrop, but using the RGB lights, we can change the color of that white PVC backdrop. All right, so you can see the effect live on the one feed. So we've totally transformed that boring white backdrop into a colored backdrop just by aiming an RGB light directly on the backdrop itself. So again, you can see the position of it. It's literally just placed right behind our subject. And obviously you need to position it in a way that is not in the photo itself. So you need to ask your model very kindly to stand in front of the light itself. Otherwise you may need to do some Photoshop afterwards to get the light or the light stand out of the image. All right, but as you can see there, these lights have fancy special effects modes. So with this one in particular, it has an RGB cycle mode. So you can cycle through all of the different colors. So on a day, if you're not certain as to what color you need to use, you can just activate that RGB cycle mode. You can take a bunch of photos and every photo will have a different colored backdrop. And so you can look at your photos and decide right then and there, if you want to use blue or green or pink or purple, whatever. But for the time being, I'm just going to leave that on and we can get some interesting results. So just to reiterate, I'm making use of a backdrop light. That is a light aimed directly at the white PVC backdrop. And that is changing the entire dynamic of our shoot by changing the color of the backdrop itself. So just to reiterate yet again, that's just the light aimed directly at the backdrop. All right, so what we're going to do here is switch on our main light again. All right, so for main light, that is our main illumination light. That's going to provide illumination to our subject. We can now see our subject, and also it doesn't change too much as far as the backdrop is concerned. Now, depending on the position of your main light, for example, if it's more front on, as you can see, we're now washing out that backdrop. So it's not as saturated. Let me just get out of the way. All right, so if you move your light more front on with your subject, some of that light may spill onto the backdrop itself. So you're not going to get that deep saturated color that you may be after. So a good idea here is just to position a light in a way where the light is going past the backdrop. So none of this light spillage is going onto our backdrop itself. Now, if that is unavoidable, let's say you want to use a front-on light, you can use something known as a light blocker. Now, a light blocker, as the name would apply, is just anything that you can use to block the light with. So this is just a cheap piece of cardboard, black cardboard, that you can position in between the light and the backdrop itself. So you just need to position it here. So you see it's kind of creeping into the photo, which is fine. I can Photoshop that out afterwards. But by positioning the light blocker, obviously we are blocking the light from our key light from hitting the backdrop. This is a way of maintaining that rich color on the backdrop itself. So you can make use of a reflector stand or a clamp. You can just keep that in position. Or try and get that out of the frame as much as possible. But as mentioned, I don't mind a bit in the frame because I can just Photoshop that out afterwards. All right, so to repeat what I did here. So with our main light switched on, some of that light may spill onto the backdrop itself, and it may desaturate those lovely colors, especially if you move the light more front on with your subject. So what you can do here is just use a light blocker. Now that can be just a cheap piece of cardboard. You can use a 501 reflector as well, with the black side aimed towards the light too. So the point here is that we're just blocking the light from touching our backdrop. All right, so let's see what the comment section is doing. Thank you for joining, guys. See Pietru, thank you so much for joining. Ishwin as well. Thank you for introducing yourself as well. Sorry, click that twice. All right, so this is also the cool thing about using constant light, is that you can see the preview live. So you can see what the photo is going to look like before taking the actual image itself, which is why I'm not busy taking photos. And the live feed is good enough just to illustrate what the light is doing. But as mentioned at the start, not as bright as flashes. Obviously, you need to compensate a little bit here and there with your camera settings. You can see on the screen, me using ISO 400, not 100, which is normally the case when I use flashes. But modern cameras can handle ISO 400 without it showing too much image noise. All right, so we have that lovely backdrop light going. We have our main light switched on. Now, what you may notice on the one side, we have those dark shadows. Now, if you want to lift the shadows, you can make use of a fill-in light, or you can make use of a reflector that will act as a fill-in light as well. So I have a little 5-in-1 reflector here. So we're just going to position this next to our subject, and we're going to provide a bit of fill-in light. So you can see how that just totally transforms the image in terms of filling in those very dark, bold shadows. Move that away and move it closer yet again. As I said, I don't mind just in the shot. And also, by the way, I'm shooting in landscape orientation, which is not normally what I do when shooting portraits. Obviously, with that, I would shoot in portrait mode. And the point being is that shooting in portrait mode, I can get some of this stuff out of the way as well, in terms of the light blocker and the reflector too. So you can see me just moving that reflector around. I'm just slightly filling in the shadows. And obviously, the closer you move to your subject, the more of those shadows you fill in. The further I move away, the darker those shadows get. All right, so you can make use of a reflector stand just to keep that reflector in position as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an additional light source to fill in the shadows itself. So we have what is known as a kicker light. Now, kicker light is a bottom-up light that you position below your subject's eye level. Now, that will create a bit of uppercut of light or a kick of light from the bottom up. So if this light switched on, also doing a bit of a blue light as well. At the moment it's not bright enough, but I can change that. So here you can just add a bit of brightness. Or you can physically move the light up and down as well if you want to change the overall intensity of the light source. Here, the kicker light as an example. All right, so let's see the result there. All right, so we got some interesting results going. So with that blue light, that kicker light, it's just providing a bit of fill-in light to our shadows. And it's also transforming the color of the shadows as well. So I don't know if you can see that. This is just a light positioned below eye level, aimed directly upwards at our subject. And here, the model can obviously do a variety of different poses, and you can see what results you're going to get. Okay, so this is one of my favorite techniques. With that light just filling in the shadows from the bottom up, and also changing the color as well. I'm just going to move it up a wee bit. All right, so you can see there in the studio, we have 3 lights going. So we have our main light source. This is also aimed down directly at our subject. And the point here is that I want to recreate a natural angle of light. Because our brains are used to receiving light from the top down, be it sunlight or ceiling lamps, whatever it may be, it makes sense to recreate that in the studio as well. Hence the reason why this light is kind of angled over our subject. So we get a nice natural angle of light. And otherwise play around here. So if you want a more fuller look, move the light more so in front of our subject. If you want something a bit more dramatic, just move the light a bit more side on. There we go. So I think there, this bottom light may be a little bit too bright. Let's change the intensity ever so slightly. All right, so we have a nice, I think a bit too much of a Rembrandt light going on here, but we can just reposition that light a bit more front on, to more or less there. All right, so if I haven't mentioned it, this main light is just a standard white light, at least for the time being. I can change the colors here as well. So if we want to get really funky with our results, let's see what color looks good. All right, so looking at that, I think that's a little bit too intense. We can either reduce the intensity on our main light, or we can change camera settings. Maybe from there to there. I'm just changing my shutter speed to something slightly faster. So I think at the moment I'm on 125th of a second in terms of my shutter speed. So you can reduce the overall intensity of all the lights by changing your camera settings. But otherwise I would not recommend that. Instead, I would just go to the light itself and make adjustments there. Because if you change your camera settings, you're changing everything. You're changing all the lights that are being involved. But if you want to make slight adjustments just to one light, it makes sense just to do so on the light itself. All right, so the people watching, I don't know if you have yet figured out a favorite backdrop color. Like, is there any specific color among the variety that you have seen thus far that we should use just to quickly grab a photo with the setup, just to see what the results are going to look like. Maybe let's try a blue, see how that works. I'm just finding the right mode. I'll give her an image. Okay, there we go. So we have a result there in terms of interesting backdrop lighting effects. And then I'm just going to reduce the intensity of this light. And here again, you can just ask the model to play around with different poses and see what you get up, what you can get on a day. All right, so based on this setup itself, I don't know if people watching, we've got a good crowd going still. If you have any questions that's pertaining to the equipment, or if you want me to make any slight adjustments to the lighting, by all means, get involved. Get a bit chatty in the comment section. I'm just going to go back to my white light. I'm going to add some more intensity there. All right, so as I'm looking at that light, you can maybe argue and say that the light is a little bit too harsh. Now, one of the golden rules of lighting is if you want to change the quality of light, you change the effective size of the light itself. Now, these lights you can't really modify in terms of using soft boxes or using umbrellas. Maybe you can use an umbrella with that. But one of the golden rules is making the light bigger will create a softer light. Making the light smaller will create a harder light. Now I'm going to change the effective size of the light by using a scrim. Now scrim is just a diffusing material that we position in between our subject and our light source. Have to position it in a way. Right, so it's getting in the frame, so I can just position it a bit more carefully. But by placing the scrim in between the light source and our subject, you can see it totally transforms the quality of light in terms of how soft it is now. Now also this scrim will rob a bit of light. In other words, it's not going to be as bright. Obviously we are losing light with the scrim. And here you can just make some readjustments to your settings or the intensity of the light itself. Let's see what we can do here. I'm just adding a wee bit of brightness just to compensate for the loss of light. But yeah, we're getting a totally softer look just by utilizing the scrim. So again, you can make use of a reflector stand just to keep this in position. You see there without, you can see the edginess to the shadows, how hard the light is. But with the diffuser in place, you just soften up that light ever so slightly. All right, so that's something to remember as far as lighting is concerned. Once you make the light bigger, effectively speaking, relative to your subject, you'll make the light softer. By making the light smaller, you'll get a harder light. Right, so a scrim is an effective way of increasing the effective size of your light and also diffusing the light. So if you want softer light, the scrim comes in incredibly handy. All right, so here I want to reposition this guy, and we're going to make use of a rim light. So rim light is positioned behind your subject and aimed directly at your subject. So you can see in the one feed where I'm putting this light. I think here it may not be bright enough. You can change that. Perhaps move it a wee bit closer as well. Okay, let's see what results we're getting. Okay, I think that may be a little bit too intense. I'm just going to reduce it again. Sorry, I'm also just running all over the show. All All right, so we can see what interesting effect we can get with that as well. So the point of a rim light is just to, well, if you're using a dark backdrop, which is not the case here, you can make use of a rim light just to separate your subject from the background. But here we can use it just to accentuate our subject's facial features. So if you're shooting someone with a strong jawline, some pronounced cheekbones, that rim light will just make that pop, right? So if you have somebody with a strong face, that rim light will just create a bit of a, what I also like to call a Superman effect. So with that rim light in position, it's just defining the jawline, it's defining the cheekbones, just adding a bit more dimension and sharpness to our image. By sharpness, I mean we just get a slightly harder overall quality of light, but that works quite well if a person has quote-unquote sharp facial features. Position it more around. You can position it here side on as well. So this is just to fill in the shadows created by a main light, just from one side. But if we position it behind, we create our rim light effect. Now, can we move that body more energy? Yeah, so probably should have made a point of that initially. So if this is successful, if we get a lot of engagement with this, we will bring in real actual models in the near future. But for the time being, it's just, me and Cami for this video in particular. But as mentioned, if things work out quite well, we'll bring in live models next time. All right. Let's see if we can change the color, see what we get. At any point, if the light looks a little bit too intense, just reduce the intensity, just play around. Obviously, you don't want to smother the details with the intense light. And different colors can be a little bit more intense than others as well. So just look through your viewfinder, look at what you're getting, and just make micro adjustments from there. Okay, so I think this is pretty much setup number one. Let's move this light around. Now, that's a bit too intense. There you go. I am digging that. I am liking these results. Try and get a bit more orange. Direction. The cool thing about RGB lighting, as opposed to gels, you don't have to change the gel every time you want to change the color. You can just twist the knob here and you can cycle through all of the colors just to see what effects it's having on your subject and to see whatever you like and just kind of sticking with it. All right, so I think we're going to go to setup number 2. So give me a bit of time. I'm just going to move a couple of things around. Basically here we're going to make use of 2 rim lights. So moving this backdrop light. Oops. That always happens. Move this guy to the side. All right, so for the sake of this exercise, I'm just going to switch off our key light. Okay. So far it's a good idea just to switch off your key light every now and then, just to see what your additional light sources are doing. Because your key light, your main light, may just smother everything, may just overpower everything, so you don't have a good idea as to what these additional lights are doing. So just switch off that key light every now and then to get an idea as to what's happening with your extra lights. So what I want to do here is match this light. So on the screen here, it will give me a number value as to what the color is. So it's 45 here. And you can go to this guy and make it the same color as well. Okay, so we have a couple of orange lights, just providing a couple of accent lights around our subject. From here, I'm going to move this light overhead. First, I'm going to find a lovely blue color to work with. There we go, I quite like that. Now, if you are concerned about that light creeping into the photo, otherwise you can just move that one. Just out of frame, obviously. I think it's this one. No, it's not that one. Getting my lefts and rights confused here. There we go. And obviously moving the lights further and closer to your subject will change the intensity, so we can just compensate here a wee bit. We can up the power if we can do that. Alright, so just move that closer to get a similar effect, as opposed to the other lights coming from the opposite direction. I want to just get a bit more cyan there. Oh. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Obviously here I would shoot with portrait orientation just to make a bit more sense as to what the final result would look like. Not giving me the best view of things. Obviously it's not flipping the right way up. That's more or less what I would work with. Let's just get that back. So just aiming carefully here. There we go. Now, if we are concerned about those dark shadows on my face, again, we can just make use of a reflector. I'm going to make use of the bigger one here. So we just want to add a splash of fill-in light. So with our light coming from the top, we're going to move this, just making some changes in terms of filling in the shadows ever so slightly. But I think here would be a, so let's put this away. So I think a second light source here from the bottom up would make a lot of sense, but for the sake of this exercise, I only want to use 3 lights. So to mimic an extra light, again, I'm just going to make use of the reflector. Yep. So if you're not seeing the effect that you want, I think that's getting it. So you can see it's making a bit of a change in terms of filling in the shadows. Maybe move the light here. This is obviously where an assistant comes in handy. As you're taking photos, you just ask your assistant to move the reflector up and down until you see something you're happy with. All right, so that is setup number 2. I don't know if you want me to change any colors. Play around a little bit. You have me all night. Well, until 8 o'clock at least, and then we have load shedding. Maybe I can play around here in terms of the color. As mentioned before, certain colors are just a wee bit more intense. So as you go from blues to reds to oranges to pinks, you may see that the light is getting brighter or dimmer. So just be mindful of that. So when making adjustments to the color, you can otherwise change the intensity. You can drop that, like so. You go up and down until you see something that you're happy with. Back to a blue. I like the blue. Too blue. Cyan. Let's get that cyan back. Wrong way. There we go. I want to quickly check something here. All right. So you may see creeping into the left-hand side and the right-hand side, we have a bit of light spillage going into our camera. So it's creating a bit of a glow around the edges of our frame. Now again, you can make use of a light blocker. In this instance, as you can see, we can just block that glow coming in from one side, just up until that point. I think the result looks a bit more visible from this side. There we go. So you can see what that is doing. It's just blocking that glow creeping into the frame. So this is just a cheap piece of cardboard that you can use as a light blocker. You can position it in the way, as the name would infer, to block the light. So we have these. Let me make use of this one. Reflector stands, you can clamp these guys in position, so you don't need an assistant on the day. Just like that. You can do so from the other side as well. I have a second one of these guys somewhere. Behind the reflector. I know I should have asked this right at the beginning. Maybe a bit too late now, but I have some music playing over. If the music is too loud, just please let me know. I don't know if the music is overpowering my voice or vice versa. Okay, so there we go in terms of lighting setup number 2. I'm just going to quickly sit down. So if you want to know more about the specific equipment, now you can see me here sitting at the laptop, so not facing you whatsoever. We will fix that in the future. But we have this review on our website. And these are the images that we created today. So we definitely recreated the image on the left-hand side. I can do this one as well. I can do that in a moment. This is the one that we're currently busy with. And here, similar to setup number, this guy here, but just changing the colors of the lights. And this is the first one that we did as well. So just a bit of fill-in light, just to fill in the shadows ever so slightly, but here we're just working with standard white light, and we used the backdrop light to change the colors. of the backdrop itself. But if you want to know more specifically about these lights, we have an entire review going. We've compared it to other similar lights as well. So if you want the technical bits, do check out the comment section. The link is provided right there. Okay, as I see it now again, that looks a bit too dark. Maybe we can play around with our ISO here, going from ISO 400 to 800. We have virtually doubled the light here. We're slightly washing out the color, so it's not as saturated as what I want it to be. But remember, in Photoshop, you can re-add the saturation. Let me just have a look at you. Right, so it's an important point to make. This is something that I do 100% of the time when working with colored lighting effects. You have opportunities in Photoshop afterwards to add a bit of saturation or to change the colors ever so slightly. So that's something to be mindful of. So looking at this result right here, if you're not happy with the vibrancy that you're getting, don't worry, just in Photoshop in the raw processor, you can just tweak that slider ever so slightly just to regain that saturation. So yeah, this is something that I almost always do when working with colored effects. Just mindful of Photoshop afterwards. You can re-energize or revitalize the colors if need be. I just want to fix this. It was annoying me. Yeah, I think that's good enough. All right, so let's go back to a white light here. So I want to recreate that one image that we had, but here we need to change to blue quickly. All right, I'm using the display on the back of these lights just to match the colors. So we have the same color coming from both sides. And I think that looks good. Now I think that's exactly the setup I used. Just to quickly show you again. Sorry, be within a moment. So this one on the right hand side. So what I made use of here as well was a reflector from the bottom up. I can zoom in maybe. And I can see the catch light right there. So I think here specifically I made use of a curved reflector. So just to add a bit of fill-in light. So we don't have the same dark shadows as what we can see over here. So maybe the shadows underneath her jawline, that's a bit too dark, maybe for your liking, maybe for my liking, but we can fix that again with a reflector. Make use of the smaller one. Yeah, there we go. That looks better. Just by positioning a reflector from the bottom up, just reflect some of that light back towards your subject. Obviously, just doing it in a way that is not in the frame of the shot. And yeah, obviously, the closer you move the reflector to your subject, the more of that light you're going to fill in. I think here is a good position. Let's lower it ever so slightly so it's out of the frame. And there you go. It's always handy to have a reflector in the studio. It makes a big difference. So from there to there, position it like so. There we go. Right, so just move the reflector around until you can see the results that you want. So this is great using constant lights. You can see exactly what you're getting as you're moving lights and reflectors around. All right, so let's see comments. Looking good, a bit more blue on the face for me. I would agree with that. Hello, Michael. Thank you for joining. Nice to have you in the comments. Already covered that one. All right. If you guys have any questions pertaining to what we're doing, by all means, drop those questions in the comment section. You can get a nice interactive live session going. Let's hide this guy. All right, so I just want to talk about these lights just for a few moments, if I may, just give a proper review on them. So these ones we have available for about 4,100, 200 thereabouts. They come in a kit of 2. So you have 2 of these plus a couple of light stands and a bag and AC adapters as well. So obviously with Black Friday specials, you can get a bit more of a discount as well. These can be battery powered, which is the case here. The batteries are not included, mind you, but you can use one of these MPF batteries. They are widely available. We stock thousands of these guys. The price depends on the overall capacity that you need. So we have the 770s and the 980s as well. So this big block specifically is a 980. With that, you can just power the light without the need of ESCOM power. So just to reiterate, the batteries are not included, but obviously on the day, if you want to make use of battery power, it would be a good idea just to buy a couple of these just to power your lights, just in case ESCOM strikes on the day, as is going to be the case nowadays. Right, but otherwise you can make use of wall power. You can plug this in directly into the wall and it will operate just as smoothly. Okay, what I like about these guys is that they have the tilting mechanism. Cool, so you can just position it like so. So the elbow joint just gives you a bit more playroom. Position the light as need be. There are special effects modes, as mentioned right at the beginning. I'm not going to cycle through all of them. I'll give you a bit of a quick lowdown. These include, but not limited to, strobostic mode, so the light will flicker on and off like this, so it will replicate lightning or a flickering light bulb. It may mimic like a TV as well. So if you want to add a bit of ambience to your scene, now this obviously pertaining to video more so than photography, obviously, but you can do that as well. There are some candlelight modes too, or campfire modes. So if you want to add a bit of a romantic light to your scene, you can do so as well. This one is fun. Let me just try and find it. There we go. Yeah, it's the police mode. Otherwise, scare people thinking that the police is around the corner, but it's just meanwhile you with this light stick in hand. Let me just switch off these lights so we can get a full idea as to what that looks like. Yeah, so if you're interested in doing video and you want to add these special touches with these special effects modes, so you have the police siren modes, you have campfire modes, you have flickering light bulbs, you have lightning, you have fireworks, etc. So you can have a lot of fun with these lights. I specifically like to use the RGB cycle modes. So that will go through all of the different colors. So I'll do that with all of my lighting. And on the day, I'll just go through my images one by one and I'll check which color combinations make more sense, working with whatever specific model on the day. Then you can choose your lights and blues and pinks, etc. from thereafter. All right, so I don't know if you guys have any more questions. So forgive me if things went a little bit quiet or weird or awkward every now and then. This is the first time me doing a live session in a studio, so obviously me sitting there answering you is not ideal, but we'll fix that in the near future. Yeah, trying to be as interactive as possible. So if you guys have questions, by all means, do ask them. I'll move the lights around and we can have a bit of fun in the studio. So let's see if we have anything. Yeah, these lights are incredibly awesome to use. Now, I think the main thing here is that if you're used to using flashes and strobes, obviously you're not going to get the same amount of power out of these lights. So ideally working in a dark environment, so no ceiling lamps switched on here. If we're working during daytime, I would block the windows to make the studio as dark as possible. It's very difficult for these lights to compete against bright ambient or indoor lighting. So if it's a little bit too bright indoors, obviously outdoors it will be way too bright. These lights will struggle to compete. So obviously when working with these lights, make things as dark as possible. Even this ring light that I'm using, so that you can see my face in the studio, even I'm not have this on obviously. So everything needs to be dark, 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 dark. So then all of your lights will have a more so pronounced prominent effect on your subject. So maybe a question around camera settings. I made a point earlier, but if you're just joining, so if you're used to shooting ISO 100, I have a fancy 1.8 lens here. So you can otherwise open up your aperture just to bring in more light. So sorry, my name is covering the settings there, but I'm on 3.5 now. So yeah, you can work with ISO 100 if you change your aperture and your shutter speed, but obviously you need to be mindful of what is practical to use on a day as well. So yes, you can shoot 1.8, but then your focus is going to be very, very, very fine. So you may get an eyelash in focus or just one eyeball in focus. So you need to aim and position your model and camera, etc. very carefully just to get a proper focus point. And obviously when working with different shutter speeds, just be mindful of, let me see you. Hello again. All right, so when you're using different shutter speeds, just be mindful of camera shake and body movement as well. You don't want to get blurry images on a day, obviously. Personally, I would recommend not shooting below 60th or 80th of a second. And ideally shoot on a tripod as well when using constant lights as well. If you can manage to use shutter speed 250th or faster, by all means you can do that. But typically you're not going to get to that shutter speed because the lights are not that bright to begin with. All right, so hopefully that explains that. Someone telling me to get a real job. This is my job. This is a very real job. I think that is my first insult ever in the comment section. Thank you so much, Erica. I'm going to frame that one and put it right next to me. I do have a real job. Thank you so much. And it is indeed a real job that many of us share, the creative industry. Now, working with people, getting our creative minds out there, and in the meantime, helping other people just to know their business as well in terms of what lighting to use, how to move your lights, and what equipment to use as well on the day. Yeah, so thank you for that comment. What else do we have? All right, so I don't know what else we can do. So I think I'm going to close off. Thank you so much for joining. If you guys are keen on me doing more of these, by all means, get busy in the comment section, message me afterwards as to what specific things you'd like me to do in the studio. And yeah, we'll get more of these live sessions going. So if you have enjoyed tonight, seeing the results live in front of you, happening as I move the lights around and also explaining what I'm doing in the meantime. Also, obviously in future, wanting to get real life models in as well. By all means, get that engagement going, and we will definitely plan more stuff like this in the near future. So thank you so much for joining. That's going to be it from my side, Conrad, on behalf of CameraStuff. Hope you enjoyed tonight, and I'll see you next time. So cheers, bye-bye, until later.